Hi, this is Richard Edelman. We had all be able to release this today in Cannes, but I'm in New York and that's the world. So today we release our special report, Trust, the New Brand Equity. And we want to tell you that there has been actually evolution in attitudes and values of consumers. We'll prove that out over the next 20 minutes. Are 5 data points that we've established about growing demands on brands. It began really 4 or 5 years ago with the change in politics, the rise of nationalism, populism, and brands were thrust into the maelstrom. And we started to see that consumers were exercising brand democracy, which meant that they expected their brands to stand up and speak up on their behalf. It morphed into belief-driven buying. And then we started to see 2 years ago that trust became a top 3 criterion for purchase. Last year, in the midst of the pandemic, there was a new reliance on brands as savior to solve my problems, but also to protect employees. And this year, we established that brand has morphed such that trust is the new brand equity. So there's been a seismic shift in values. Part of this pandemic related, but also part of this related to downturn in economy and whatnot. So what matters more is so-called we values. For example, standing up for people like me, customer safety, value of the product. What matters less is image, trendiness, excitement. What's also connected to the bigger concept of trust, it's because business is seen as the only ethical and competent institution in the world, well ahead of government, NGOs. And if brands are the tip of the spear for business, then it's going to be brands that are going to have to deliver on this promise. Therefore, we believe that there is a broader definition of brand relevance today. Historically, culture has been the remit of the brand to reflect culture. The issues of purpose, so supply chain or systemic racism, things like this, those were the purview of the company to solve DE&I problems. Societal problems were the area for government. But as government has failed and as brands have become the essential partner in people's lives, we think that there is a new definition of cultural relevance, which is to combine culture plus purpose plus society. Therefore, the brand is the all important. So we are out of the field in 14 markets around the world, 14,000 consumers. We also have been tracking 115 brands across 7 countries, China, France, Germany, India, Japan, US, and UK. So that's 7,500 respondents. We've combined data in today's report. Number 1 for today, brands have to change the world. That's the new expectation. It's not enough to just sell functional benefit. Here's a vital data point. For the first time, brand trust matters more than brand love. This is deeply significant. Brands have always pursued love. That's good, but today we want value, we want quality, and we want trust even more. Brands are more important in my life. I have come to depend on brands in part because of the pandemic, but in short, this is across all age groups. I have a deeper dependence on brands, and therefore it increases my need for trust. All these, trust matters most. Trust is important in all aspects of my life. I also believe that brands have a big impact on the environment, that brands can keep me safe, brands can improve the economic recovery. Think about this. The weight on brands is gigantic, and brands are expected to act beyond just their business interests, to tell us the hard truths, to create positive change in society. to also make our culture more accepting. 86%. Go beyond your classic remit of just selling products. People have changed their mindset. It's today, make the world a better place, not just make me a better person, by 2 to 1. Specifically, I like to reflect brands to reflect societal values, to meet societal needs, to change social interaction for the better. What's representing my lifestyle, matching my sense of humor, the me things. Today, changing culture is the most powerful way to earn trust in brands. Specifically, if you are simply promoting the functional aspects of your brand, you earn 27% trust. If you reflect culture, for example, if you put diverse people into your ads, you get a 25-point bump. But if you change culture, if you do something important, 38-point bump in trust. 2/3 of people trust your brand. You actually address significant problems in our society. Trust is the new brand equity. 2 in 3 people now believe that they have power to force brands to change. Think about this. From a year ago, when we were brands as the savior, to this new mindset of consumers, where I feel I have the power through my buying, through my also speaking up on social, I can get a brand to change almost anything about itself. Beyond that, 3/4 of people say, I want brands to use their power to make society better, improve environmental situation, improve labor practices, increase workforce diversity. Again, note the identity between the brand and what has been prior the responsibility of the corporation. Also, if I don't trust the company behind the brand, I will give up that brand if I love it. Slightly higher numbers for higher income, but 40% of all people say, I'll give it up if the company isn't ethical. Also, consumers will buy brands they trust. Look at the statistics by country. 7 to 8 times more likely, whether it's in China or whether it's in France or the US, more likely to buy a brand that I trust. It's a new playbook for brands. We have 2 sets of issues that brands should consider. The first is foundational issues. We were stunned by this finding, specifically that the number 1 issue for brands to address is workers' rights and a living wage. This is all markets, it's across all demographics, and it's across all industry sectors. In short, a living wage is central to the proposition of trust. Second is a safe reopening of the economy. Is in transition across the world, India in a different place to the US and the UK. But again, foundational issues, let's get to those first. But then what matters most is what matters locally. There is no silver bullet across all brands. Example, in Brazil, we're addressing 8 to 34-year-olds with a health and AIDS product. You need to focus first, after you've dealt with wages, systemic racism. Whereas an auto company addressing people my age who are more or less affluent, you need to focus on sustainability. So in short, you need to look at the issue, pick something that is relevant to your industry, to your brand, and proceed. But most of all, what matters to me is that you appreciate that taking a stand gives you much more reward than it does risk. We started to see this when we did our study on the first anniversary of George Floyd's murder in the US about systemic racism, where among all communities in the US, you got 1 bump in trust if you stood up and spoke up on behalf of DE&I. But more globally and across all the issues, what we see is somewhere between a 4.5 and a 2 times reward over risk in terms of growing trust in a brand if you speak up. Don't wait. Don't hope that this time passes and that the issue passes right over your head. It's not. You have to wade in smartly and consistently. Brands also need to be smart about who and how tell their story through. Specifically, earned media first, social media last, but also appreciate that you have to tell this story multiple times in order to achieve belief. As to who tells the story, it is some combination of peers and experts. We find today that trust is horizontal in terms of peer voices, but also experts on the vertical axis, top down. Influencers, universally important. Brands also have a very short time in which to make their case in the event of a situation. So, for example, in that moment in time when China and America collided about Xinjiang and labor practices, and apparel companies were caught in between, wanting to keep the consumers in China, at the same time wanting to make sure that their employees in the US were going to be okay. They had to decide, they had to choose. And unfortunately, many of them stalled too long. You have between 2 and 3 days to state your position, and your CEO has to be very clear in his or her statements. There are significant rewards for brands for speaking up. Let's be clear, trust drives growth. Trust is not an intangible any longer. 61% of people, if they trust your brand, will advocate for it. 57% will purchase it. 43% will stay loyal even if there's a problem. And 31% will give them your data or also participate in activities, events, etc. So there are 4 examples of programs that we've worked on in the last year that show this intersection of culture, purpose, and society. The first is for Ajinomoto, a campaign called Take Out Hate, to counter anti-Asian bias in the wake of ridiculous COVID. And we saw that the rise in sales in Asian-owned restaurants after the campaign led by influencers was enormous. Second, a new jingle for a new era. We found in the 100th anniversary of Good Humor bars that the ice cream trucks in America was a racist one. And had to go. Turkey in the hay. I sang it to my kids. What did I know? Well, we found out that, and we, in a month, persuaded the client to engage RZA of Wu-Tang Clan to come up with a new song and put it on trucks all over America. Third, Wildlife Watch. With Samsung, working with conservation groups in Africa, we have put cell phones into trees all over the continent so that the public can act as wild watchers and counter poachers. It's become an enormous success of saving the animals and engaging the public. Last is Hair Love, working with Dove on a concept called the Crown Act so that women of color can wear their hair naturally and be able to go to school in America. So, in short, there are 4 for brands coming months. First, you have to recognize that it's no longer the culture that you've thought about, which is just that you're reflecting modern culture. You have to change culture. You have to be part of society better. That means putting purpose and society into your thinking along with culture. Second, that we have the ability through brands to make these changes. Be open to speaking out. Be open to taking the risk, because as you've seen, 4.5 to 1 reward versus risk. Third, the convergence of brand and reputation. The idea now that the face of business to the public is the brand. The corporation is simply the support element. So it is the brand responsible for sustainability, DE&I, ending systemic racism, education. And last, Trust is a tangible, drives growth. We can actually show that brands that do what we've actually grow. So with that, I will pass it to our Chief Brand Officer, Jackie Cooper, and our panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard. Delighted to be on this session today. We've long been known for our trust data in the corporate world, but it's actually great to be here today to share these findings around brand and trust. And in keeping with the stellar nature of the data, I'm genuinely delighted to be joined by the guests on our panel today, who've each achieved so much in their respective careers. Just to let you all know that our TikTok panelist wasn't able to make it today, but it's so good to have one of the industry's most experienced CMOs take her place. So with that, I'm going to start with you, Antonio, as you stepped in. Thank you so much. Welcome, Antonio Lucio. 40 years marketing experience. Antonio is a successful global CMO and marketing industry leader who's worked with some of the most recognized companies and iconic brands. He's held global CMO roles for Facebook, HP and Visa, as well as the role of Chief Innovation and Portfolio Transformation Officer for Pepsi. A recognized thought leader and global influencer in marketing transformation, Antonio is also known for his inclusive leadership. In all his roles, he delivered business results while significantly increasing the representation of women and people of color across seniority levels in the entire marketing ecosystem. Antonio has been a regular in the Forbes Most Influential CMOs list, achieving top 5 positions in the last few years. Thank you, Antonio. Coming on to Emma Greed, who I have to confess has been a friend since her days when she was based in London as CEO and chairman of ITB Worldwide, forging partnerships with A-list celebrity brands and talent. Moving to LA, Emma has rapidly built talent-backed businesses of her own, as CEO and co-founder of Good American, launching with Khloe Kardashian. Then if that wasn't enough, she co-founded Skims with Kim Kardashian, carving a new path with a typical retail startup to empower all women to celebrate their bodies and offer high quality designs in all sizes with absolutely extraordinary success. Emma is an advocate for championing diverse and inclusive representation through her work with 15% Pledge and as a board member of The Real Real. Emma also serves as an active trustee and board member of Women for Women International and Baby to Baby. Welcome, Emma. Finally, but absolutely by no means least, welcome to Amanda O'Neill, who is the Director for Brand, Social Media and Employer Branding at Microsoft. Amanda directs these teams whose work brings to life the personalities of at Microsoft Live and employee stories at microsoftlive.com. She's a leader who combines her extensive market research experience, consultation, and global marketing skills to drive impact for companies of all sizes. Amanda thrives on identifying new opportunities, bridging gaps, coaching, and rethinking ways to address long-standing business challenges. Thank you to all for being with us today. So to all of you who are watching this session, please don't forget to submit your questions to the panel via our Q&A form. We're going to go through a little chunk of chat and then we're going to come to all of you. So please feel free to submit. So as we heard from Richard, the fact that trust now outweighs brand love is actually a really interesting conversation starter. Even more compelling is the fact that changing culture is the most powerful way to earn trust beyond the functional, beyond even reflecting culture, which is kind of where marketing has traditionally played. Our values have changed with all that's gone on in the world, and now we want our brands to be about the we, not just about me. It's a time of tremendous change, with challenges and opportunities for business. So let's get thoughts from these brilliant panelists. Emma, I'm going to come to you first, because I just wanted to sort of have a chat about building trust in fashion. You've so proven that there's always room for new brands if they hit the zeitgeist of the time. So these are not only commercially savvy, they all have purpose at the heart. And so I wanted to ask, how has it's been for you and the business, basically putting genuine representation and inclusivity at the core because that's inspired your business, and it's really delivered real and trusted relationships with people, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Jackie. You know, I think that, and it was so fascinating just to see that data, because of course, when I started these businesses, you know, I had no such information. You kind of just go off of a hunch and what, you know, I thought I wanted and what I thought, you know, was needed after, you know, 15 years of working in marketing. But I think if you're going to have trust with customers and a community or a following, you've got to have a relationship that goes above and beyond the purchase, meaning that before and afterwards, and having, you know, this constant talking to your customers and listening even when it's really hard to get the feedback, because inevitably when you have a startup business like I do, you don't get everything right out of the gate, but you've got to be willing, if you're going to earn trust, to listen to all the feedback that you get and then make decisions in your business that are based on the trust that you're building with your customers. I think, you know, a good American, we don't even go into a new category without talking to our community first. And so when we bring a new category to market, whether it's swim or it's shoes, I think consumers can trust that it's been created with their needs in mind first and foremost. And so, of course, it isn't just about them rushing out to buy something that is, you know, about that season or that moment. It's something that they've actually been part of creating, and they feel like their feedback has been taken into mind. So I think that's really, really important. And, you know, before I started Good American and became part of the founding team at Skims, you know, I spent 15 years working with brands to kind of cast a diverse looking, you know, crew of people for their marketing efforts. And I think when you've got brands like Skims and Good American who put genuine representation, inclusivity at the core of the business, you know that the company actually looks like that image that we're putting forth. When the, you know, the co-founder and the CEO is, you know, a mixed race woman, you know that when you lift up the covers, it all is what it is from a board level right the way down. And I think that goes a long way to, you know, gaining trust with customers.
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's been amazing to see, and well done. It's been super fast. And sort of leads me, Amanda, to ask you, because what Emma's talked about is sort of standing for something, and we saw in the data, and that we see that when brands actually take a stand, Richard talked about the rewards outweighing the risks. So just look at the stock price, for example, for Nike after that very famous Colin Kaepernick ad. In fact, in that survey just now, 78% believe that they can change a brand's societal impact, which highlights the impact brand activism can have on the corporate part of the business. So how do you manage this closer relationship between brand and the corporate side of the business? Because it feels like it's not really separate anymore.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not separate. I think, you know, when we think about it, it's similar to what Emma was saying, is we think about it as a complete journey, right? There are multiple touch points that a customer is going to encounter when they're interacting with Microsoft or any company. And so when we think about the brand, or we think about, you know, the products and services that we're putting together, we're thinking about our initiatives, and we're even thinking about the company culture, all of that comes into play, right? So I think you're absolutely right, where we can't actually separate, well, the brand is doing this, our products and services may be at this, you know, quality level, or we don't actually stand for XYZ in our company, or our employees can't actually speak on our behalf and tell us, or tell our customers that, yes, absolutely, Microsoft is, you know, walking the talk that they are professing. I think that, you know, we absolutely wouldn't be able to get anywhere without the complete picture. And so I think when we're thinking about the brand, we really are starting with internally, how are we making sure that, you know, when we think about the culture change that Satya has made in the company, how are we pulling that into our products, our services, evolving our processes, diversifying our workforce, and then, of course, including people. Similar to what Emma was saying, you know, it's great, we can cast people, you know, and I say it loosely, we can cast best people as we bring them into the company, recruiting them, but retaining them, from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. It's that inclusion, it's that bringing a new voice to the table and having that show up across your products and services. And so I've just been lucky to have, a really diverse team from a social media standpoint and from an employer branding standpoint who are actually people who have come from a variety of diverse backgrounds and identities that are pulling themselves into the work and helping us to show up as a different Microsoft.
It's really interesting and sort of segues to my intro, Antonio, for you, because you've championed, there's a sort of theme coming through, which one never really knows when you start these things, but you've long championed diversity and inclusion. So, what does culture mean to you today, given that?
Great to be here with you all. Before I get into the culture aspect, I would like to frame the conversation and take a couple of the things that Richard made clear in terms of the implications and the role that diversity will play within it, which is I think very important. Over the last 40 years, I've seen the marketing and comms discipline evolve. There are some things that are fundamentally the same, that we all exist to build brands that stand the test of time, and they have to be anchored in purpose. The only thing is that today purpose is the what, why, and the values that a company embodies, not just the what and the why. They have to have a direct impact on people's lives. It's not just about what your products do, but also what the product do within the context of society, which is one of the findings of the study. The third one is it's all about the emotional connection, not just rational. It is all about the emotional connection. But emotional connection today is not just that you want to make your brand cool and you're going to bring the stars to actually showcase your brand, is that you have to be emotionally resonant within the societal moment that we're living. The fourth is behaving with integrity, which is when you fail, and all brands will fail. It's a matter of time and facts, because everything changes. Some things you control, some things you don't control. Behaving with integrity means that you own it, you make a commitment to change, and then you prove through actions that you are indeed changing. And that is also a shift in the way that people are looking at brands. And the last part is constant innovation, and constant innovation to always deliver against your purpose. The change, though, is that from a marketing standpoint, we always looked at brand equity because you wanted preferred brands in the market. Today, you need trusted and preferred brands, with trust ahead of preferred. Because if you don't get the trust, you're not going to get to the preference line. And that is what the study does so well in articulating. Diversity becomes critical because it needs to be part of the company values from a business standpoint, because we need to reflect the clients that we have, and also from a value standpoint, because we want our companies to be socially and morally and ethically responsible. And although that has always been the case, and we've been always talking about it, now consumers, clients, government officials, employees, all of our stakeholders are going to make sure that we live up to that promise. And that to me is a fundamental change.
Yeah, it's brilliantly put, and it is a zeitgeist change across all stakeholders, and also there's no division anymore. What you highlight there is it's one world, literally one world, and Amanda, you sort of talked about that as well. And I guess it's not enough for tokenistic philanthropy. It's not enough anymore to sort of donate money and keep it. In the past, we know with clients like Unilever, where they have purpose baked into their corporate strategy and the brand strategy, but actually baked into the corporate strategy and the behavior of all of the brand leaders, that actually does drive growth. So Alan Jopes talked publicly about that, and to your point, Antonio. And Emma, I was going to come back to you because really very close to your heart. It's not like you're not busy, You're running you're running these multi-million-dollar businesses, but you've also, and I guess it plays to sort of stepping up and giving back and being accountable. You've supported the 15% pledge that's calling on all major retailers to pledge 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned businesses. And a good number of names have signed up, which hits on the culture, purpose, and society intersection that drives trust. But how hard has it honestly been to convince businesses to commit to this? And what kind of conversations are you having with them?
You know, it's such a great question. I think, you know, and just to kind of dial it back a little bit, Jackie, you know, after the murder of George Floyd, of course, we all saw this huge wave of activism for the Black Lives Matter movement and, you know, renewed calls for justice reform, for the end of systemic racism. And so many brands and retailers wanted to find a way that their companies could make tangible change. And Aurora James, who is the founder of the 15% pledge, you know, and talk about, you know, founding something with with complete authenticity. You know, she went out and, you know, had a call to action. And the 15% Pledge Foundation was really created as a non-profit organisation to urge major retailers and brands to commit 15% of their shelf space to Black-owned business. And so our mission is to encourage the private sector, and we're talking, you know, Fortune 500 companies to individual consumers, to use their financial power to create much more equitable market share for Black-owned businesses. And what we've done in little over a year is create $10 billion of economic opportunity for Black-owned businesses to help build generational wealth in Black communities. And so going back to your question, the reality is anything that's really worth doing, as you know, is usually really, really hard. And I think if, you know, a lot of retailers are honest with themselves, they know that they're really massively underrepresenting Black-owned businesses. And oftentimes we're finding that those percentages are so far away from where we want them to be. But as Richard said, brands are expected to take action beyond their product and beyond their core business. And we know that there's so much more reward than there is risk. And as you guys said in the opening of this, trust literally drives growth. And so while it's been difficult to, you know, to connect a lot of retailers to this initiative and to get people to do it, it actually is going to have so much impact on one side and then so much great kind of, you know, brand halo effect on the other side. So I would say it's been hard, but those brands that have stepped up are seeing the results in their business and that love coming back from consumers, because again, we want to shop where we feel aligned with the purpose of the business and the mission of that brand. And the 15% pledge is just one other way for, you know, businesses to really get behind, but to do something that is tangible. So I'm, you know, so incredibly proud to be on the board of this organisation. But more than that, you know, to create that level of impact in just under a year shows the power that brands really have and the power that they have when they decide to take that trust level to an entirely new level.
Yeah, I mean, you've nailed an unmet need, because business didn't sort of understand that needed to be done and it needed to be delivered. And the sort of rapidity of take up shows that it's just an unmet need, and things should never, this isn't for something that's a short period. This should be forever. I mean, this is going to have to change the way we work forever. And Amanda, how does a company like Microsoft sort of balance, you've got your sort of unique corporate innovation, how do you balance that unique corporate innovation and commitments in a way that extends to that consumer community, particularly given your remit and sort of responsible for content and social media, which is how everyone engages now?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, as we think about the ability of corporations like Microsoft that have this massive platform and this massive reach to be able to make change that can impact, you know, millions, billions of people around the world. Sometimes that can get a little tricky to try to communicate, right? So it's just too much. It's overwhelming. You know, sometimes we had a focus group a few years back and we talked about empowering billions, and people were like, I just can't get my head around that. That's like too overwhelming. And it's too much, Microsoft, it's too much. And so, I think as we think about, the change that we can make, what we try to do is make sure that it's connected to a meaningful and a meaningful aspect of someone's life, right? And so, even when we're thinking about quantum computing, and people going, well, why does Microsoft even care about quantum computing? And I have a colleague, Steve Weens, who puts together explanimators that actually brings that back to, what does that mean? Why do I care about quantum computing? How is that going to help, either the planet, my community, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think what we've done is gotten a little bit better to be able to, and I guess I got to bring it back to this whole idea of diversity and inclusion and a more diverse workforce, because our content, sometimes would take on a very corporate feel and a corporate, sound. We'd use all the right buzzwords, we use all the right phrases. But as we bring in people from different backgrounds, we can actually create messages that other audiences want to hear, and not just the folks that are in the walls of Microsoft, right? And we come with, a bunch of privilege, we come with a bunch of, benefits, et cetera. But what we want to do is make sure that we're helping others and that we're accruing to the mission of the company. And the mission of the company is to help empower every organization and person on the planet to achieve more. And it just goes back to that whole idea of purpose, as we've, thought about this whole theme, the greater good. How is Microsoft helping the greater good? And how do we communicate that in a way that's, a little bit more simple? So we've gotten a little friendlier, a little approachable on social media to do that at scale. Just tapping into, I think, as you were talking about, Emma, tapping into the zeitgeist of the time. Us all on lockdown has really generated some new opportunities for us to have flatter conversations, right? It used to be a little bit more hierarchical, depending on whether you could fly, travel, connected to certain conferences and things like that. And we've just seen a lot more unique voices in the conversation, and we've been able to tap into that, and I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah, that's really true. Actually, if you meet people during this time, there's been more of a sort of instant intimacy, because you're seeing them in their lounge or their kitchen or whatever, which is kind of weird because you're not with them in real life. But it's
right.
So yeah, welcome to our homes, everybody. Antonio, you sort of talked about the fact that this has to be for multi-stakeholders, and I know this is a sort of passion of yours, that this has to just, to the point of us saying it's sort of one world. But with that sort of universe of stakeholders under the CMO's purview being wider than ever before, you've got everyone. You've got your consumers, your employees, your investors, you've got your activists, which, can be challenging, but you have to listen. How can brands navigate the complexity of that multi-stakeholder audience to ultimately build trust? How this is a big question, but you've had big jobs, so I thought you could manage.
Well, the brand building model in the age of trust is different, and we need to consider 4 things that are nicely and need to be nicely integrated. Number 1, every corporation needs to have a more active corporate brand within the context of people's lives. The what and the why a corporation exists and the values with which they operate need to be known by people. Corporate brands need to be treated like consumer brands. Great examples of this are Microsoft, are P&G when they do the Olympic work, is Budweiser when they take the Super Bowl commercial and they talk about the values of sharing within the context of their product. That cannot be a tactic. That cannot be a stunt. It has to be a well-articulated plan. People need to know where the corporations come from as it pertains to the products that they consume. The new generations demand that. It's no longer a choice to hide the corporation behind brands. They need to know what you stand for. So that's 1. Number 2, the product brands or the family of products that a corporation has have to play not just within the relevance within category game, but within the relevance within the broader societal game. So if the corporation is getting closer to consumers, the brands, the product brands need to be playing within a broader sort of societal game. It is important also that those product brands acknowledge who owns them so that everybody knows and that there's transparency behind their actions. Then it's all about all the people that are important for a business to exist, starting with employees, your customers, your consumers, your influencers, and even government officials. We need to create a well-integrated narrative that it is stakeholder relevant, but it is completely integrated within the context of where the corporation comes from and what role do products play in people's lives. This is a fundamental change in the way that brands are built, because normally in a corporation, you have different people responsible for all these pieces. Comms normally does the corporate, and by the way, corporate is just with the leads and with B2B, and then you have the marketing people doing the consumer brands or product brands. Then you have HR doing employees, the public affairs doing government officials, the sales team doing the clients. We cannot operate as silos anymore. We cannot have a multiplicity of agencies in a network talking about all this. This has to be coordinated and well orchestrated, because there has to be integrity between what the corporation is, what the products deliver, against whom they're playing with. Oh, and by the way, we need to measure it differently. We need to measure brand equity as much as brand trust. So it is a fundamental shift in the way that marketing and comms is done, and we just need to acknowledge it as a holistic end-to-end process, because if we don't, we're going to end up with brand cacophony, where the corporation is saying one thing, the product brands are saying another, we're having different narratives to the different stakeholders, and you know what? Everything converges in social media. And then what people are going to say, particularly the new generations, are going to go like, who in the hell are these people? And trust is going to be eroded, and we are not going to be able to build businesses that stand the test of time.
Ladies and gentlemen, an eloquent roadmap. Fantastic. Thank you, Antonio. We're all nodding madly here. Amanda, that is your business. That is how you're running your business.
Oh, amen, amen, amen to all of that.
And you segued without even this being a setup, which is fantastic, about social media. And I would be shocked by some of my colleagues who were very excited that you were coming on, Emma, if I didn't ask you about that. I mean, you've built business, your marketing and your profile and your engagement has been with people through the channels of the Kardashian social platform. So what are your thoughts about sort of rethinking that role of influence? You've had a background in harnessing. I mean, you and I talked when we first met. We were harnessing entertainment names before anyone knew the word influencer, right? And so you've really understood how to sort of rethink that role of influence, and you've got now your influencers being partners, not just being sort of light touch endorsers, right? But what's your view for these brands that you've built that have come of age basically in a digitally native era? What's your view about influence and trust now? And then we're going to move to Q&As to the outside world.
Well, you know, Jackie, it's so interesting because I've done this for so long that I've seen every side of it, right? The good, the bad, and the downright ugly. But I think that trust gets built when you change culture and when you really, really matter in your customers' lives. And at every single day at Skims and Good American, we're addressing really significant issues to meet our customers' needs. And we don't need, because of the social media aspect of our brand, we don't need to do more traditional marketing partnerships. We don't need to do badging exercises because we're changing culture with what we're actually doing from a product standpoint. And it all starts with the product that we're delivering, whether we're servicing up, you know, jeans in 17 sizes or underwear in 9 skin shades. I think to Antonio's point, the brand building model in this age of trust is entirely different, and social media will make or break you, and it's really about embracing all sides of it. You can't just take, the upside. And, I'm very lucky that I have business partners with hundreds of millions of, followers, but that doesn't build billions of dollars of brand equity, which is what we've actually built at, in Skims. And so I think that really it's about embracing all sides of that, and that's where I think a lot of brands can go wrong, because you think about social media as a more traditional ad format, and that's not what it is. It's a two-way street, right? And when you treat it like that, it works brilliantly for you, but it isn't a place where you should be putting out ads. That's just not how it works, and that trust thing has to go both ways for it to really work.
Yeah, it's really, really, really good. Thank you. And moving on to some outside questions, I'm going to give the first one to Amanda. What are your views on what the core components of the employee trust proposition of the future will look like for organisations, shifting away from the employee value proposition? What are your views on what the core components of the employee trust proposition? I guess we're making up a phrase in the question. Shifting away from the employee value proposition. So in other words, is trust going to affect our employees, how you relate with your employees in that way?
Yeah, I think so. I think the change that we're looking at is not just expressing a value of something that a picture that we're painting and we're presenting to employees, but it really does come back to what Antonio was saying is, does everything else connect and prove that out? And so that promise, and sometimes we call it the employee promise, but does that employee promise, which is, again, going back to that whole two-way street that Emma just talked about, it's not just on social media, but it really is bringing the behaviors of social media into the company. How are we thinking about that? I give you this, you give me this. It's a partnership, as opposed to, you come to this company and here's, your bag of goodies, right? And so I think that trust really comes from, being able to prove out what that promise is, and then also being able to keep that dialogue open between employees.
That's great. Here's a question for all of you. You can decide who wants to go first. For all, do the panelists have concerns about authenticity in building trust and avoiding the pitfalls of consumer cynicism around purpose washing? Good question. Don't all rush at once.
I'm happy to go. One of the biggest I think confusions that the industry has is trying to equalize purpose with corporate social responsibility. And there are two fundamentally different things. Purpose is what you do, why you do it, and your values. Corporate social responsibility should be an extension of that. The problem of authenticity lies when brands like to borrow equity by grabbing into corporate social responsibility that has nothing to do with the business that they're in, has nothing to do with why they're in business, and has importantly nothing to do with the values that they represent. Let's not forget that for many years, the tobacco companies were the #1 patron of the arts in the United States and more broadly. That's the best case that you can show, to the extent that what you're doing, as Amanda was saying, is consistent throughout your product lines, the way that you're interacting with people, and when they're not, that you're able to live up to it, commitments and action to change. You will behave within the level of authenticity that's required. What we cannot do, just like brands did many years ago, like you need equity, get a superstar, get a band to try to make it cool. Now you cannot do the same thing with social causes. There has to be a marriage between who you are, why you will do the things that you do, your values, and those areas that you decide to play a part on, and then you will have the right level of interaction. Because, by the way, as everyone in this panel knows, and by the way, Emma, more than anyone, your consumer will read through you all the time when you're not behaving in line with your values.
Oh yeah, read through you and come for you.
Are you worried about purpose washing, Emma? Do how do you sort of deal with that in terms of being challenged about sort of Kardashians are they're massive asset, massive powerful social channel, but also up for immense criticism. So how do you manage that?
Honestly, Jackie, this is what comes back down to, our businesses being actually, product-based businesses. I'm not here selling the Kardashians. And, I think in the same way that all of us from a corporate perspective might, one day have stories of anyone in our company coming out, the CEO, anyone, a senior level. The company has to be able to live beyond the individual, and the product promise is what's important. I'm not promising you anything about any of the girls. What I'm promising you is that we're going to deliver you a better than product, and I'm delivering it to you at a price that you expect, and we are developing things that we believe in, and that's what I'm selling you. I'm not selling you Kim Kardashian, and I think that's the big difference in Skims and Good American. They're not brands that are based on the girls and what they do every day, and honestly, I think it's a really dangerous place to live, because we're all human, and in the same way, I can go and do something that not everybody would find agreeable tomorrow. That doesn't mean that everybody needs to not, burn their Good American jeans. It's all about the product promise. And I think that, to the point of, am I worried about purpose washing? That is something that you really have to think, we think about it every day, because of course in our business, we're asked to be part of so many things. And it comes back down to those true values, the true purpose of the brand, and how and what we align ourselves with. And so we have to think long and hard about that, and not, take every opportunity to be involved in every different thing. And I think that's the hard thing for brands at this point. It's like, what's my cause? Well, maybe you just don't have one, and that might be okay too. But if you're a brand that came up in the way that we did, it's really easy to figure that out, because it's naturally a part of what we do. It isn't an add-on that comes from a marketing department.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an extremely valid point. It's because that would just be another kind of badging. Like, we don't want to exchange one kind of badging with another kind of badging. And the brand's domain has sort of expanded to include society, purpose, and culture. But we're also not government. We also have to give a brand experience. We also have to keep aware of what is that brand offering, what's the differentiation, and what is the terrific experience. And by the way, if you can match that in with your consumers to enhance their lives and to be we, not just me, then that's it on steroids. So I think ultimately, to your point, what's really going to protect you is that the product, as we were saying before we came on here, every single inch of your product, and the strength is actually that those products were needed. I mean, irrespective of who you've done it with, actually, that there was an appetite and a need for those products. Amanda, do you think that with Microsoft being the company that it is, and sort of so stellar and such a name sort of globally, do you think you ever having to deal with the vulnerability or the possible criticism of doing things tokenistically or purpose washing?
Yeah, I think with 160,000 employees around the world, we always have something to look out for. Yeah, I think, to Emma's point, it's being thoughtful. We don't always have to say something. We don't always have to jump in. We don't always have to, be there in the moment in the conversation if it doesn't make sense for what our brand stands for, what our mission is. I think sometimes, any company, if we're not taking a stand, and we should be, I think it does go back to, again, what we've been saying is it's that consistency, but it's also, I think Emma brought this up at the beginning, it's don't just get in the game right at the moment, right? You should have been working on this, months, years, eons before. And so I think this is the time when companies can start thinking about what is our purpose? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? think about that now, because when the next thing comes up and you're not ready, it's not because you didn't know something was happening, right? So prepare now, get those cross teams going. And I think, as Antonio was talking about, the way that we're working now is breaking silos, especially in large corporations. And so if you are not a communicator that's working with an HR person who's working with a D&I person on a daily basis, that you're not going to make the movement that you need to make in this very multicultural, no boundaries society that we're in. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good, again, it's like we haven't rehearsed this or set this. Here's a question which segues so brilliantly from that point, Amanda, which is someone in our audience has asked this of you, Antonio. Antonio highlighted an important reminder that all brands at some point will fail. What strategy should brands take when recovering from a PR crisis?
I mean, the first thing is acknowledge that you've made a mistake, and as I said, every brand will do. Sometimes because of actions, sometimes because omissions. Culture changes, a competitor moves, whatever. You decide not to speak on time, or you decided not to. This will happen. The best practice, and it goes back to one of the things that I learned from Richard many years ago, which is you acknowledged the fact that you've made a mistake. You're very specific about it, and then you actually not only make a commitment to do things better, but that you actually act upon it and report back about it. It's the only way. By the way, the corporations, I think Emma made the very good point. We're all humans. My God, I've made every single mistake on the book. That's what makes us human. We will fall. We will make mistakes. Corporations, brands are the same way. So the same thing that we're asking from people, which is, okay, you made a mistake, I'm going to improve, and these are the specific things that I need to do about it, is what we all need to do. Very important though, just like both Emma and Amanda were saying, that it is a strategic choice that every corporation needs to make as to what are the issues that are fundamentally relevant for their business to continue to grow. When you make mistake within those are going to be significantly more important than on others. But that strategic conversation, which is multi-stakeholder, needs to happen in every corporation today, so that people will know when to act and not to act, and when to take a stand and when not to take a stand.
Brilliant. Well, we've come to the end. You really great perspectives from such different businesses and different viewpoints. Really, really superb. Thank you very, very much. I'm going to hand over to Richard to close.
So I want to close with a series of requests. The first is that there be no distance between CCO and CMO, that the convergence of brand and reputation is so important that there can no longer be a CEO agenda versus a brand agenda. We've got to find a way to put those two together. The second is we need to have brands center on the issues of the day. I think the third thing is to really recognize the shrinkage of mainstream media. I read this morning that newsroom in the Chicago Tribune, where I'm from, is down to 80 people from 300 2 years ago and 125 buyout. We don't have news channels that are telling the truth. So therefore, brands are going to have to be truth tellers. And we're going to have to find all sorts of ways of going through social channels, through our own channels, but we're going to have to be important and newsworthy enough to earn people's faith. I guess the last thing that I would urge on all of you is to recognize this centrality of trust. Trust is output, not an input. Trust is an outcome. And it has to be done in a way through action. We're not any longer going to make promises without delivering the goods. And so, again, the great judges of the world are all the consumers who exercise belief-driven buying. but are now thinking they can tell you brands what that is their belief, that is their conviction, and they're going to make it happen. So I'm somehow in this mindset of almost participatory capitalism. It's an idea that, to me is really important, that we show that we are open for ideas, that we show that we to our employees and we want our customers to help us gain the way forward. That brands are the leading edge of business forward of the most trusted institution in the world. And it's down to us to solve societal issues. So with that, I close. Thank you all very much for listening, and have a great summer.